Alright, over the past, what month is it? May, January, 3 or so months, I've dug through the catalogs of animation history, specifically Japanese animation history, and I have found the greatest anime from 1970 to 1979. This is a series I want to do where I highlight all the best anime from individual years. I know that literally contradicts what I just said. For this video, it's going to be this entire decade because honestly, these individual years, they don't really hit like that, man. And the video will probably be like 4 minutes individually for each of these, so it's just easier to encompass the entire decade because as you can imagine, a lot of these series just didn't age that well and they are not great. But starting with 1980, I will be doing individual years going forward, so hopefully I can crank out these videos a lot faster because I won't literally have to go through years and years of anime all at one time for one video. Now, I do know that there are technically anime and Japanese animations that predate 1970, but let's be real, you probably don't even plan on really watching any anime in this video, so no one really cares about any anime that's predating 1970 outside of just curiosity. And truthfully, a lot of the series in this video were really hard to track down and watch. So I can only imagine the headache I would probably get trying to find any anime that predates this little small decade. So we're just not going to do that. We're going to start at 1970. Now, rules, obviously, as the big giant word greatest implies, I'm not going to be highlighting every single anime of these years. I'm just going to highlight the ones that I think are the best. Disclaimer, there were some anime that I thought were kind of cool, but I did not include in this video because they're kind of really hard to watch or not worth watching. Not worth watching meaning there's no real subtitled version that exists anywhere on the internet, so it's only raw, or you have to jump through so many hoops and find so many super dated 2000 forums that you just don't really want to do that for what ultimately is probably just gonna be a mediocre dated series. Obviously, I am just one human being, so this idea of going through the greatest anime of every single year ever is rather time consuming, meaning that no, I did not watch every single series or every single future series that will be in this list of videos from front to back, beginning to end. That's just not realistic. Like, cut me some slack, bro. But I did try to watch a series if it was shorter than 30 episodes. So if it's only a series that's like 24 episodes, then I tried my best to just truck it out. If it's more than 30 episodes, I try to watch enough to where I get the general idea and vibe of the series. One last thing that applies to this video but isn't really implemented all that much but will still apply to future videos in this series, which is why you subscribe, is subscribe if you want to see any more of these cool videos where I just basically go through the history of anime. One last thing that I should probably talk about, even though it's not that relevant to this video, it will definitely be relevant for future videos. There will be series, there will be anime that I don't personally like all that much, but I still understand the magnitude and importance of it as an anime, and I understand how popular it is, so it will still be included in the video and I will still talk about it. A perfect example is like One Piece. I don't really care for One Piece, but
nigga, you just hating, feel me? That's why you ain't never gonna have no paper, ain't never gonna have no bitches, feel me?
Yeah, I know, shut up. I don't really care for One Piece, but I'm not gonna be deluded enough not to include it in whatever respective year One Piece came out in, because ultimately I think that would just hurt me and hurt the integrity of what I'm talking about. So don't worry, even if I don't like a series, I will say I don't personally like the series, but I'll still acknowledge and talk about it as if it's any other series in the video. So just as a short checklist to go over all the rules and ramifications of what I just said in a short and condensed manner, I'm sure I've put a timestamp somewhere in the video that you can skip to because this intro is like 5 minutes long at this point. I apologize, but just to clear things up, This is going to be me talking about the best anime of each individual year besides this video. This video is the exception. I will include the entire decade for reasons I've already explained. Even if a series is considered good, I will still leave it out if it's too hard to watch or there's no reasonable way to watch it with subtitles, English subtitles that is. I see this being less and less of a problem as the series goes on for obvious reasons. And finally, I will acknowledge any anime that is considered by most people to be great and a classic, even if I do not personally like it, because again, I think that would just undercut the integrity of these videos if I pretended that like Hunter x Hunter didn't exist because I don't like it. By the way, that was just an example. I actually do like Hunter x Hunter. The One Piece thing, not an example though. I don't fucking like that show. I don't care. Cry about it, my nigga. Anyway, let's hop right into it with the greatest anime of 1970. I actually only have one anime for this year, Ashita no Joe, also known as Tomorrow's Joe in English. If this sounds familiar, it's because it is. This is the anime that originally adapted the manga Ashita no Joe, but what most people probably know Ashita no Joe from is the Japanese naming of Megalobox, an anime that came out a few years ago, and I got a sequel, I want to say last year. To my surprise, Megalobox and this anime, Tomorrow's Joe, are pretty different. I mean, you can tell that Megalobox and Tomorrow's Joe pretty much have the exact same source material. The characters and their personalities and the way that they're written are pretty identical. The main difference really just comes down to the direction both of these plots go, and they go in similar but different enough directions to the point where I'd say if you really enjoyed Megalobox, then Ashita no Joe is still kind of a good watch, even though it's an anime from the 1970s. Ashita no Joe tells the story of Joe Yabuki, who is a kid in the streets that needs to change his life, who has a nasty attitude, who meets a nice little mentor who gets him into the line of boxing, blah 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 blah. The story you've heard of many boxing and sports combat stories. Rough and tough kid gets groomed into being a nice stand-up guy with morals and all that jazz. I know I'm kind of simmering down Ashita no Joe probably, but keep in mind that this was in the 1960s when the manga was thought of, and this anime started in the 1970s. So that predates Rocky, which I think is like the king, what most people would consider of like that underdog come up boxing story. That predates Rocky by like 6 or so years, I think. So while watching this in 2022, it isn't the most special thing. I've seen a lot of articles written about Ashita no Joe say that in this period of time, Japan and fans in Japan of Ashita no Joe were very inspired by the series, and there are lots of Japanese boxers who attribute this very series to being the thing that got them into boxing. So when looking at the series, and honestly this is probably a lens you're gonna have to use for all the anime in this video, you really need to think of it as something that was strictly a part of its time, not necessarily something that was created to stand the test of time. And I think that's shown a lot with those 2 seasons of Megalobox, which again is supposed to be sort of a reimagining combined with the retelling of Ashita no Joe. They very much so don't handhold you and try to sucker you into believing that Joe really has a chance of losing a fight. It's more so a character piece, and you're supposed to become enthralled with this idea of Joe. And honestly, I made a super great video not too long ago about Joe as a character that I'll link down below in the description. Just watch that, because there I talk about like capitalism and how Joe can be symbolic of like an everyday person in society and blah blah blah, and how I think he's one of, if not the greatest underdog character in anime. And I made that video before the 2nd season even came out, which adds even more layers to his character. Honestly, I probably should make an update video on that, but all those things that make Joe special in Megalobox also make him pretty special in Ashita no Joe. One last thing before we move on, just look at this animation for a second. That's not bad, is it? Hand-drawn anime is something. Let me tell you, I have a super deep appreciation for hand-drawn anime after watching all the series in this video. This is gorgeous to look at. And maybe it's a little bit because like I'm sort of an animation dweeb and I really appreciate when people take time to hand draw stuff, but gorgeous to look at. Ashita no Joe, without a doubt, the best anime of 1970. It's the only entry, and it's definitely one of the best anime from the decade of 1970 to 1979. Moving on to 1971, we also only have one entry. You now see why I'm just kind of combining this entire decade all at one time. Also, before some snarky person gets in the comments and like, actually 1970 to 1979 is only 9 years, a decade is 10. Shut up. We have the original airing, the original series of Lupin III. Let's be real, man. If you don't know what Lupin is at this point, you probably need to peel the cap back on your anime watching and dig a little deeper. He's had so many future iterations of series and movies and just everything, man, everything. Lupin is that guy. But in case you don't know who Lupin is, I'll give you a quick rundown. In short, Lupin is the grandson of a great well-known thief, and he decides to go in that same line of work, becoming a thief. Any series, movie, or anything else involving Lupin is pretty much always just going to revolve around him coming up with some elaborate plan to steal something and get rich quick. That usually always ends up with him not having any money at all. And even in the situations where his plan does miraculously work, he is someone who constantly wants more and wants to become the most powerful person in the entire world, so he can never stop his thievery. Explaining the basics of Lupin can really leave you in like kind of a misty state, and so this is one of the very few anime in this video I'd say still holds up and could be worth watching. But honestly, you can just jump anywhere in the Lupin timeline that you want and watch and still get the general idea of who Lupin is and probably still enjoy it. It's a nice mix of like comedy and action, and it's really hard to sell with just words, and it's something that you probably should experience for yourself and form your own opinion on. While I happen to be a big fan of Lupin, even if I wasn't, this would be one of those things where it's like, nah, Lupin's a classic, man. I have to talk about it at least a little bit. So there you go. That's 1971. Moving into 1972, now we're starting to get into the more weird, obscure, probably not as heard of type of stuff with Devilman. Now, this anime actually has a pretty interesting backstory because it's one of the first anime that I can find anywhere that's considered to be sort of butchered in terms of its adaptation because of censorship from Toei Animation. I'll be honest though, looking at this series from the optics of 1970, this series still kind of got away with a lot, I'll be honest, and truthfully, I do not see this ever being shown in the 1970s in the West. Now, you're probably looking at clips that I'm showing right now and you're probably like, oh, what, this isn't even that crazy, plus the animation is bad, yada yada. But you have to remember, as time has gone forward with media, we've become more and more risque and more mature. So something that was seen as too sexy or too violent in the 1970s has a definitely different type of tone and vibe than something that would be seen as too sexy and too violent in the modern day. Because honestly, there really isn't anything that's too sexy or too violent in the modern day. We as a society have kind of just reduced ourselves to, if you don't want to see something, don't look at it, but we're not going to censor anything for anyone. That's like a whole different topic. But talking back to Devilman, this series follows our main character Akira Fudo, who one day casually absorbs the powers of a demon. Yes, you heard that right. This demon's name is Amon, and essentially Akira becomes this sort of superhero. It's like Spider-Man, but with demons. which is why his name is Devilman. You see what I did there? You see what I did? Yeah, you feel me, I know. So this series really interests me, and I watched it from beginning to end, and then I read the manga. Butchered is a word that I think is okay to use in this scenario. Usually when people are like, oh man, they butchered the adaptation, the anime adaptation is terrible, that's awful, oh my goodness, and it's like a character is slightly thinner than they are in the manga. My Hero fans, you know who you are. But no, here the manga and the anime have completely different endings, and the only thing I can really come up with for why Toei did this is because Toei wanted to pitch this as just a cool dark-ish series that like preteens and teens could watch, and that was never the idea of the manga to begin with. So just skip to here wherever I've put this timestamp on the screen if you don't want me to spoil both endings of the anime and the manga and you want to check it out yourself. Just gonna give y'all the time to skip. Alright, if you are still here, that means that you are okay with me spoiling both of these things. By the way, if this does sound vaguely similar to Devilman Crybaby, that's because it's another reimagining of the series, but I'm not going to bring that up because I think I did that too much for the Shiki no Joe, and I don't have another bit like that, so this is whatever. So in the anime, basically, Akira comes out on top. And it's a great day, and everything's beautiful and gorgeous. In the manga, let me tell you, they have this big scuffle with Satan, and Amon and Akira lose and die, and Satan destroys the world. And I was like, that's a really dark ending. As with a lot of dark endings, they're usually really unsatisfying, but there's usually a bigger premise to why a series ends in that way, because we as humans like closure and happy endings and things of that nature. So with more digging and more research, I found out that the creator of this series used this series to basically say war is bad. And Satan is supposed to be sort of allegoric to say that like nobody wins in war, and people maybe look cool and there's a back and forth and you're cheering, but the war is bad, and if you have the chance, you should just avoid it, because more than likely we all lose in some sort of way. And that sounds like a really basic message, but you really again have to put yourself in the moment with this series. There was a lot of worldwide conflict in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Just off the top of my head, the Dirty War, Black September, and I want to say the Ugandan invasion all happened in the 1970s. Now, I'm not here to give history lessons. You should definitely go look those up if you don't know what those are, though. So there was a lot going on. There was really a lot of trying times. And in the 1970s, there were a lot of people who just wanted peace and wanted things to like relax. Because, you know, we've had 2 world wars at this point, man. Can we just chill? Look, war bad. So I know that sounds like a really simple premise and like I'm giving this series too much credit, but it was kind of a cool message in the moment. Actually, I'll be honest, I don't really care how many people think the war is bad memo is a cliche in writing. If you do it right, it works every single time, in my opinion. Every single time. War is bad is a great moniker to go with, and it works really well in Devilman. I'm not gonna lie, I don't necessarily think you need to go watch the original, just watch Devilman Crybaby. But that being said, Devilman set a great base for what that reimagining 50 years later would come to be. Up next, sticking with 1972, we have Gatchaman. So something that I discovered when going through all these anime is this idea that only Westerners loved superheroes and, like, you know what I'm saying, spandex and all that thing. That's cap. There are plenty of superheroes in the East. They just didn't reach the stratospheres that superheroes reached in the West. And let me be clear, when I start describing this anime, I'm not trying to offend anyone. I understand that Gatchaman is a really popular thing in Japan, and lots of people really love Gatchaman. There are many iterations of Gatchaman. Trust me, I know. I'm deciding if I even want to bring those up in later videos. So when I describe this, it's just the experience I had and the mind state I had. I'm not trying to bring down Gatchaman or say that it's any better or any worse than a more traditional superhero in the mind of an American and a Westerner, okay? Relax is what I'm saying. Relax. So when I was watching Gatchaman, there were times that I had completely forgot that I was even watching an anime, and it more so felt like I was just watching a forgotten about superhero show from America. Like, the tones are just that similar, and it's really crazy to think about. So Gatchaman is the story of a team of 4 heroes who have been assembled to improve the standing of the environment for the world. But there's an evil group of people named Galactor, I hope I'm saying that right, who aren't from Earth and want to take over the world for their own selfish needs. It truly has that super like cheesy, cartoony vibe to it that you would 100% expect from a series from the 1970s. If you've ever seen the original Speed Racer, it very much so has that vibe to it. Without a shadow of a doubt, if I was a kid in the 1970s living in Japan, I would have loved this show. Would have had posters, would have had action figures, hella Gatchaman merch. Like, I would have had it all. It ran for 100 or so episodes, and it got plenty of spin-offs, and those spin-offs are something that we'll probably talk about later down the line as they take themselves a little bit more serious and have a little bit more of complicated writing and character arcs and things of that nature. Like I said, we'll get there when we get there, but as of now, Gatchaman is a really fun and cool series for what it was at its time. In the closeout 1972, we have 2 more anime, Astro Ganger. No, not you guys. And Mazinger Z, at least I hope that's how you pronounce that. So 2 mech animes. I'll be honest, I don't really care for mech anything, not just anime. I don't really care for mech cartoons or mech movies. Transformers, not really my thing, which is actually really weird, and I'm not sure why, considering the fact that I actually really love the kaiju verse, but whatever, that's the point. These 2 anime definitely fall in that I don't really care for them, but they're so impactful of this year that I kind of need to include them, especially Mazinger Z. It's actually something that's still as recent as, like, I want to say maybe 2017 is getting like new renditions and movies, and it's something that's still definitely somewhat of a staple in like Japanese otaku culture, and it was so relevant at this point in time and just going forward for years and years that it's actually one of the first IPs in terms of anime that had like a real big collaboration and crossover event. Devilman is also included in that, and I'll talk about those as we come across them later in the years. But essentially, there's not really too much to explain. If you've seen one mech anime, you've seen like a lot of mech anime. There's a scientist who works on the mech, and he serves to be some sort of mentor for our main character, and our main character is typically going to be a boy in his preteens or his late teens that controls the mech, and there you go. Obviously, there's a few variations that have come along the line, but essentially that's what you need to know about the overwhelming majority of mech anime. Like I said, not really my cup of tea, so I won't go into too much detail, because the combination of me not caring for it too much and the simplicity of early mech anime makes it to the point where it's like, it's not really worth going into much detail, and this video is already 20 or so minutes long, so we're just gonna leave it at that for 1972. And that's the end of this video, and I know that completely contradicts what I said at the beginning of the video when I said I was going to do the entire decade, but honestly, I did not expect to have as much to say as I did about the series, and I did not expect me to look up and see the recording be 20 minutes. That was very surprising. So I am just going to completely renege and walk back on everything I said in the beginning of the video, and I have no idea how I'm going to structure the 1970s. Maybe I'll go from 1973 to 1979 in the next video, or maybe I'll just do a couple years in the next video too. I genuinely don't know, and I don't really want to try to set up an expectation. After the 1970s though, 100% I'm just gonna only do individual years for each video. So we just got to get out of this like real messy period, and after that it's going to be a lot more structured, and that will please my little recording, writing, and editing process. Anywho though, that being said, it's been like 2 months. So how's it going, guys? Hope life's good. If you even watch my videos consistently like that to even know that I took a 2-month break, thank you. I have returned, and I am going to be going hard for the rest of this year. I swear it. That being said though, I make videos of this quality or better all the time, so subscribe, like, all that jazz, so YouTube can recommend you more of the videos if you enjoyed it. I am leaving, hopefully not as long this time.